It's a pleasure to see so many faces that I know here and to meet new faces here. We got Michael and Sam here. Sam's, did you put shoes on yet? I didn't. I met him 2 years ago. I didn't have shoes on 2 years ago. And they told, Mike and Sam tell the story. They met themselves and they looked at each other and they said, whoa, kindred spirits. And so they reached down in their pockets and they had healing stones they both carried. You still carry those? They were tiger eyes, weren't they? I mean, this guy's a Dutchman from Belgium, all right? And we got a mid-American, I don't know, And what are they doing? They're carrying the same healing stone in their pocket. So amazing. That was an interesting conference we had out there. Judith had set it up for a bunch of juvenile offenders who were coming out and were taking a course, and she invited them every year to the World Learning Center. And she invited me out to speak, so I prepared a presentation for juvenile offenders. Well, I had that H1N1 flu or whatever it was going on at the time, and they canceled. So Judith brought in an inner city band for the event. So I had done a presentation for juvenile offenders. So I then had to switch to a presentation for inner city youth. Chino did his labyrinth at that time, and I didn't know what a labyrinth was, and so they did this educational program, and they took the kids out there and had them walk that labyrinth and talked about releases, and you can imagine these children had some things they need to release. And they did the walk, and some of them got out there, and he gave them balloons to carry with them. And when they got out to the center and they did the release, and let the balloon go. And a lot of these kids were crying at that time because they never had a chance of quiet and solitude, I think, and the ability and someone to guide them in a reflection process that they did. And Chino did that. These kids really got something out of it. And then they came in for a didgeridoo lessons. They actually formed a little group, I guess. Sam made up these big long white pipes, which is a didgeridoo, and taught them how to, I can't make the noise. And they played them, and Michael played his flute. And Mike did his presentation on the art, and these kids were amazingly receptive to the graphical image of what we're trying to teach, something I'm trying to incorporate with my own children. I bought a set, all 17 pictures, a big set. I put them on my wall underneath a picture of Napoleon Hill in a little corner. I call it Nap's Corner. I bring the kids up, and what does this mean to you? And I don't tell them anything. And I'm going to keep on doing that till they understand. And someday which I wrote in the back of Mike's book, someday I hope to ask them the principles of success, and where did you learn that? And they're going to be saying, I always knew. And I think at an early age, that graphical impulse is something that's important to all of us.
What ages are they?
Pardon me?
What ages are they?
My children, they're young. I adopted them. My boy is 7 now. My daughter's 9. They're Russian born. Nice children. They miss me. I miss them too. We all know Judy. I have to thank Judy for the opportunity to speak here. The first time I ever met Judy, I went out 4 years ago to the World Learning Center, and I just wanted to see what was going on. I didn't know much about Napoleon Hill Foundation. I knew a lot about Napoleon Hill. I've been teaching this stuff to my Marines for many, many years. Not formally, but in guidance and counseling, that sort of thing. So I wanted to find out more about it, and I came on out to the World Learning Center, and it's a room, 200 people, I guess. It was a luncheon, and what did she do? Oh, there's Dr. Hill. He's going to speak a few words. Put me on the spot. I should have been warned by that because the precedent had been sent. Last year, was it? Went to Houston. Dr. Hill, I really want you to come out and sign books. Sign your grandfather's book. I said, okay, I'll do that. So I show up at 10 o'clock at night, and oh, Dr. Hill, it's so great. I want you to meet Shane and all these people, and 11:30, and here's your schedule for tomorrow morning for the book signing. Okay. So I look at them. I'm going to sign books a couple hours. What's this? Oh, I've got you scheduled to speak. 20 minutes to 1,200 people. Okay. You can do it. You can do it, man. She told me. Last week, I finally opened up the email that she sent me with our schedule, and it's 2 pages. And I looked at the front page. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I'm coming out here to support the foundation and learn and meet interesting people. So I didn't look at the second page till this weekend. I didn't know I was going to speak. And the trouble with being Napoleon Hill's grandson is you expect something from me that you wouldn't expect from an average guy in the crowd. So, and I have to be careful what I say. And anyway, and Christina's the same way. I got to Malaysia. I prepared a keynote. I was all ready for that. And the day before the convention, she said, Dr. Hill, I want you to open a convention said, okay, I can do my keynote. No, I want you to do another keynote. Well, I said, I had this 1922 speech that was delivered by Napoleon Hill at Salem College. It's really good. I can read that. She said, okay, you can do that. I said, okay. She said, how long will it take? And I said, well, he took an hour to deliver this thing. Oh, you only have 30 minutes. The prime minister is going to be in the crowd, you know. Well, the chief minister is going to be in the audience. So, but you can do it, Dr. Hill. I don't know if she learned it from Judy or Judy learned it. You can do it. So I went back to my room, and I'm sitting there, and I get all these pages of Napoleon's, and he's talking about the 9 great failures, you know, that you get a little bit of lifetime of riches. Turning points in his life were failures. All of them were failures early on in life. And he's talking about those things. And so how did I cut this out? And he was a little bit verbose, so I was able to get it down. It wasn't too bad. I kept looking over the chief minister. Is he asleep? What kind of look am I getting from Christina? You know? That was interesting. I get up to the stage. I wasn't nervous. I got my pocket glasses in my pocket. I get up to the stage and looking at all these people and the big screens up there. And I start giving my presentation, and I realize I don't have my glasses on. I can't read. I can't see what I'm doing. So I casually reach my pocket, put my glasses on. Before starting, I want to make it very clear that my bloodline to Napoleon Hill did not give me any special knowledge or insight into his philosophy of success. For example, during my first visit to the World Learning Center, one of the other attendees managed to corner me, and he was a PMA graduate, leader certification graduate too. He asked me to give him one piece of information, just one bit of advice that would help him along. Now I have to tell you, he scared me. I wasn't scared of him. I was frightened by the vulnerability of his request. And I was frightened a little bit by the responsibility that he was thrusting on me, the responsibility to speak for my grandfather. I decided right then and there that the best thing for me to do in the future was to keep my mouth quiet. Shut. Especially if there seemed to be a need in the individual for me to speak for my grandfather. I figured that no one didn't know how stupid I was without opening my mouth. A year later, I was at the World Learning Center again, and another attendee asked me for advice about a decision that would, and eventually did, change his life. He was a bit fearful about making this particular decision. And I dodged his question for about an hour, but I was in the car with him. Finally, I got a little bit frustrated, so I pulled my sleeve up, and I said, I want you to touch me. He's driving. I want you to touch me. I want you to pinch my arm. He looked at me, and understanding flooded his eyes, and he reached over and he pinched me. He said, okay, you're not Napoleon Hill, are you? I showed him that I was not Napoleon Hill, and that I had no special insight for him. Then that resolved, he then asked me for my thoughts anyway as J.B. Hill. I've been listening to the guy's problem for an hour. I told him that the problem I saw had more to do with his fear than his plan. Fear allows us to make informed decisions and can be a good thing if it's treated as a caution sign, but not as a stop sign. If you stop, you fail. You always fail. That's what I told him. Well, whether he heeded my advice or not, I don't know. I know that he didn't make that decision for almost a year. He's about a year into it, and he's doing good. Last year, I attended a panel discussion in Pittsburgh where a number of very smart people sat around a long table and answered questions from the audience where I was sitting. Don Green was on that panel, and Sharon Lecter, and a lot of other people know a whole lot more about success than I do. Well, a man raised his hand and asked the question of the panel. And he got good answers from the panel, but I thought they messed the answer. I didn't give him the best answer. So I sat in the audience and listened. I talked to him afterwards. I approached him afterwards, and I told him. I told him what my answer was. Well, he didn't know who I was. He just thought I was a guy wearing jeans and sweater in the audience. I could tell that he didn't listen to me. You know how that goes. He slept me off, no matter. Next morning, on the first day of the convention, I donned a coat and tie. You look more credible if you dress Napoleon Hill about that, by the way. And I went up to the podium to speak. I was flanked by 10-foot-high videos, you know, big old monitors or whatever they call them. Felt like the Wizard of Oz as I walked up on that stage. Between speakers, they were playing Napoleon Hill tidbits like the ones on YouTube. You can imagine following that act. I guess there were 500 people in the audience. My sister was there. It was the first time she heard me speak at the time. And I gave my speech, on the way up there, I thought this was a book promotion. I didn't realize it was a motivational convention, and they expected me to give a motivational lecture. So I did my little book promotion, and I closed my book, and then I had to give an extemporaneous motivational speech. But I pulled it off, didn't do too badly. Terry wasn't ashamed. After the speech, the man I talked to the previous night came up to me, and he apologized to me for not listening. He explained, "I didn't know who you were. I thought you were just some guy from the audience." Well, I assured him that I was just some guy from the audience, but that too went on deaf ears. He just thanked me for my advice and told me he intended to carry it out to the letter. As he left, I was still muttering, "But I am just some guy from the audience. I have no direct line to Napoleon Hill. There's no gene which programs someone to achieve success. Parents give their children's genetic potential, yes, but they also give their children thoughts and values and ethics and habits. And these, my friends, are far more important. These are the things that can be both constructive and destructive forces in children's minds." Parents can instill a habit of positive thinking in their children. And that is absolutely essential to get your children to aspire to see and aspire to the things that they can accomplish. Success is a potential that we all have. In 1925, a man by the H.A. Overstreet, who was an educator and a psychologist, asked his readers to imagine a future generation in which every person believed that creative vision was possessed by everybody, and that there was some way to train and stimulate that creative vision far beyond its latent condition. He thought education would be directed toward the arousal and training of creative powers latent in our children, and that this would give birth to a society alive with creative power. Now, these are not just the words of H.A. Overstreet. These are also the thoughts that ran through the mind of Napoleon Hill himself. How do I know that? My special link to Napoleon Hill? No. I have here in my hand a book that some of you have seen. This is Napoleon Hill's personal copy of H.A. Overstreet's book, Influencing Human Behavior. And throughout this book, he's underlined things, and he's written things. He hadn't written a lot, but he did underline and write. He even found the mastermind in here. This book is signed by Napoleon Hill and used green ink, and dated 1934, 3 years before Think and Grow Rich, and about 7 years after the Law of Success. And he even has, what's fascinating about this book is that you can read 2 chapters of it, and there are 2 pages, and then he'll sum it up in a quotation. He had a habit of doing that sort of thing. Now, this book is a treasure to me, not because it's signed in ink or it's dated 1935, but because it records his thoughts as he was formulating them when he made these marks in his book. Now, Napoleon Hill underlined the passage in Overstreet's book. On page 233, it talked about creative vision. He underlined it, and he put parentheses around it, and he put a big check mark in it. Yeah! He clearly agreed with that. So Napoleon Hill thought that this potential for creative power is in all of us. I believe that he specifically designed a philosophy of success to do exactly what Overstreet was envisioning, to engender creative vision being implanted in the minds of our children. I have in my possession a letter from Napoleon Hill, which he wrote to his parents, in which he described himself, not as a writer, or as a motivational speaker, or even as an editor, which he was at the time. He wrote to his parents and described himself as an educator. So those of us who want to follow his lead should be proud of our success, yes, but we should not be proud of our success per se, but rather we should cherish the ability and seek the opportunity to teach what we have learned. We need to stimulate creative vision in our children so that they too can see and fathom a way to success. My sister Terry is a Napoleon Hill follower who found a way to instill Hill's philosophy of success into each of her 4 boys. Today, one is an oral surgeon who has completed both the PMA course and the leadership certification course. Another is a spinal cord surgeon working with Delta Force. Her youngest is an MD PhD at Johns Hopkins University. His medical degree is his minor. He considers himself a scientist. He wants to be a scientist who studies the nature of life itself. Her eldest son was an Army Ranger before he went back to school. He later worked in Europe for 4 years and before taking a well-paid position in Washington, D.C. How did she do that? How did she
That's
do?
awesome.
Well, Terry taught her boys to set goals at a very early stage. For example, her son Tim, who graduated from the PMA course and the Servant Leader Certification course, told her that he wanted to attend a private boarding school for high school. Terry pointed out that he did not have the grades to get into that particular school, and that it was so expensive that she did not see how they could afford to send him. After all, she would have 3 sons in college at the same time in a few years, and as it turned out, she had 4 in college at the same time. Anyway, Tim had already thought this through and had a plan. He said that he would raise his grades high enough to get into that school. He went on to say that although he knew the boarding school was expensive, he was willing to compensate after graduation by living at home and going to the local university. Tim said that he would even be willing to go into the Army so that he could use the GI Bill to help with the cost of his education later on in life. Now think about this. Tim was 13 years old when he approached his parents to negotiate this plan. Both sides kept their bargain, and it worked. For some time now, I've been encouraging Terry to write a book. I thought the Napoleon Hill, A Woman's Perspective, would be a proud and a good title, but I was wrong. After all, do we really need another success book? Terry should write a book, but I think a better title might be Napoleon Hill, A Woman's Guide to Parenting. Unfortunately, Terry's book has yet to come out, has yet to be printed. Terry's book. Didn't it have a nice ring to it? I haven't written the book. I don't know. I'm not supposed to be up here. I've written it. Anyway, her book certainly wasn't available to us when I was growing up. It took me until I was 23 or so before I began to understand that I was just an average guy who'd been making the same kinds of mistakes that so many young men do. For example, in asserting independence from my parents, I had managed to lose a full scholarship, quit college, and had been drafted into the armed forces as a private. But I had 2 things going for me. The first was that I was Irish, which means that I was forever imbued by my Irish-born mama with a thirst for education and learning, a habit she gave me. My father gave me ethics. That's his habit. And second, I was Napoleon Hill's grandson. But at most, my bloodline allowed me to make use of this philosophy earlier than life, 23 years early, for people to come to Napoleon Hill. I knew the name, and I trusted Napoleon Hill because he was my grandfather. And that is why I turned to him when I was ready. Anyway, by the time I was 23, I had made quite a mess of myself. I was alone, lonely, and had started to drift through life waiting for something to happen. I knew that I needed to make a change in my life, but how? I had no money, no education, and could not bring myself to go to my parents and ask for help. I remember my grandfather's book, Think and Grow Rich, and a few weeks later came across it at the Piggly Wiggly at the checkout stand. I brought it home to read, and I did. I read it again. I read the weekend. I reached the section on excuses at the end of the book when the hair started to stand up on the back of my neck, and I began to understand. I realized that I held the recipe for success in my hands. It was the key to everything: financial security, personal relationship, business. It could be used to achieve anything of value. It could be done by anybody and could be done by me. It was just one catch. It was going to be up to me. With that thought came 2 sensations. The first was a sense of relief that my life was up to me, and to me alone. The second was the sobering fact that because my life was really up to me, that I was responsible for it. I finally got it. I finally understood what my parents had been telling me all along. Everything was up to me. It was to be my choice. Free will. In the Quran, Allah tells Adam and Eve not to approach the tree of life. Of course, this differs from the biblical version of Adam and Eve, in which God tells them not to eat of the fruit. Another difference between the Quran and the Bible is that in the Quran, Satan tempts both Adam and Eve at the same time, who then approach the tree together. But in the biblical version, Satan first tempts Eve into eating, and Eve gets Adam to eat the forbidden fruit. So when the Lord went to Adam and said, "Why did you do that?" he said, "Well, Eve told me to do it." And he went to Eve and said, "Why did you do that?" And, "Well, the serpent told me to do it." Somehow I know we like to blame women, don't we? But put the blame on somebody else. In the Quran, at least, well, they both did it together. Free will, whichever version you have. If you put aside the differences, we can see that most of the world believes that man was given 3 great things at creation: human life itself with its immortal soul, free will, and the Garden of Eden. Well, man lost Eden, but he was left with 2 gifts: life and free will. But without Eden, the means to continue living was left to man to figure out for himself. To accomplish this, man had free will, which gave him the ability to choose to aspire, and possibly to create his own Eden for himself and his family. It seems to me then that free will given at man to creation must be incredibly important. In fact, I believe free will is one of the unnamed riches of life, and that it is the most important. If you look at the other 12 riches of life, they all stem from what? Free choice. You can choose to accept them. You can choose not to accept them. So the ultimate richness of life, which Napoleon Hill did not name, maybe because it was so obvious, I don't know. In my opinion, is free will. We choose to believe or we don't. We choose to be saved or we don't. And we choose to succeed or we don't. Perhaps this is the first message we should send to our children before we try to teach them to succeed. Thanks.